On the storm-lashed coast of Oregon, whispers tell of a light that never dies. Perched upon jagged cliffs, a lantern hangs suspended, defying time itself. It once belonged to a woman who waited for her husband at sea. He never returned, but the lantern has never gone dark, burning each night like a beacon for those who have lost their way. Fishermen murmur that anyone who gazes upon its glow will hear a tender voice calling, luring them into the depths from which none ever return. One day, Margaret, a folklorist, walked through the skin-cutting cold of the Oregon coast. In her hand was a weathered leather journal, filled with fragments of legends she had gathered across the Pacific Northwest. But this time was different. No mere rumor or fireside tale. The lantern she sought, they whispered, still burned in truth. The path to the cliff twisted upward, the earth soft and slick with sea mist. Her boots sank into mud flecked with gravel, sliding with every step. Below, the ocean thundered against the rocks, its roar merging with the shriek of the wind. A grim symphony, like the ocean's own mournful breath. With every step, she felt herself drawn closer to something that did not belong to the world of the living. As the shadows thickened, Margaret saw it. Upon a sheer outcrop, untouched by human hand, a lantern burned. Its flame, golden and flickering, did not falter in the gale, as though shielded by an unseen hand. From afar, its glow was a lone, unblinking eye piercing the dark, at once inviting and threatening. Margaret froze, her skin rising in prickling waves. The impossibility of it all rattled her. No path led to that cliff. No hand could have placed the lantern there. Yet its light remained undeniable, brighter even, as her gaze fixed upon it. For an instant, she swore she saw a figure behind the flame. A slender woman's silhouette, her hair whipping wild in the wind. A coldness surged through Margaret, seeping from her knees to the soles of her feet. She drew a breath, but the air was too thick, too salt-heavy, as if the sea itself was swallowing her lungs. Her pulse hammered, and a single question carved itself into her mind. Was this legend come alive, or had she stepped across a threshold no human should ever cross? Beneath the cliff, the surf screamed white and merciless. Yet above that chaos, the lantern burned in calm defiance, untouched by nature's fury. Margaret opened her journal, but her pen trembled. The ink scrawled crooked as though the storm itself wrested the words from her hand. All else sank into shadow. Only the lantern's light remained, like the beating heart of night, a secret beacon summoning her closer. In that moment, Margaret knew research was no longer her only reason to go on. Another force, deeper and more perilous, had taken root within her. She had to see the lantern with her own eyes, and learn why it had never gone dark. Night along the Oregon coast was a suffocating shroud, a black veil without a single tear. The crash of waves rose from the abyss below, mingling with the lash of wind against the cliffs, as if thousands of unseen whips cracked in the dark. Yet through the frozen void, the lantern still burned, unmoved by storm, untouched by reason. Margaret stood transfixed, her eyes bound to its glow. She realized the light was no longer fixed. The lantern shifted slowly along the cliff's edge, each quivering shimmer like the fading imprint of invisible footsteps. No wind could carry a lantern in such a way. No rope could draw it forward. It moved of its own will. The sky, strangled by heavy cloud, gave no light of its own, yet the lantern, cast a pallid trail across the coastal path. The glow wavered, brushing over slick moss and jagged stone, forming a fractured passage through the dark. Margaret found her feet already moving, unaware she had begun to follow. Each step sent loose rock tumbling into the chasm, their echoes joining the sea's roar, like the drumbeat of a funeral march from the deep. The lantern drifted farther, yet never vanished from sight. It kept its distance, always just beyond reach, close enough to lure, far enough to forbid. Its glow painted grotesque forms upon the cliff walls, long, grasping arms, twisted faces half buried in seaweed, all leaning toward her, aching to touch. The air grew colder. Mist clung to her clothes, seeping into her skin. Her steps grew heavy, but the compulsion within her only sharpened. In her chest, her heartbeat matched the lantern's wavering pulse, as though her body had been drawn into its breath. A violent wave crashed below, spraying white salt into the air. Through that drifting haze, Margaret glimpsed her. The slender figure of a woman, hair in wild disarray, dress pale and fluttering like a torn shroud. Margaret shut her eyes, but when she opened them, only the lantern remained, floating like a phantom that knew its way home. The coastal path narrowed, crumbling stone leaving barely a strip wide enough for a footfall. Beneath lay the black abyss, where waves struck the cliff face like 1,000 hands pounding at a wall. The lantern did not slow. It led on, patient, unyielding, drawing Margaret deeper into the dark that swallowed all things. She could no longer tell whether she heard the thunder of the sea or the blood rushing in her ears. Each time she faltered, the lantern flared violently, its glow throbbing like an enraged heart, before gliding forward again, forcing her to follow. For one terrifying instant, Margaret felt her body was no longer her own, dragged onward like driftwood in a whirlpool. At last, the lantern came to rest upon a jagged outcrop above the sea. It hung in the air, no rope, no chain, burning calm and defiant against the howling gale. Waves below burst into white foam, circling the cliff in a ritual rhythm. Margaret stopped, her body soaked through, yet her eyes could not break away from that light. In that moment she understood. The lantern did not guide towards safety. It led elsewhere, to a threshold between sea and night, a place where a person could be erased from the world, leaving not a single trace behind. On the outcrop that jutted into the sea, the lantern still burned, bright, suspended like a beating heart against the void. Margaret stood motionless, her body drenched in mist and salt spray, her eyes locked upon the shimmering flame. Around her, the world began to change. The roar of wind and wave ebbed away, replaced by something softer, an indistinct murmur rising from the depths of the ocean. At first the voice was fragile, no louder than breath. Then it swelled, resonant, filling the air. A melody slow and mournful, a funeral lullaby echoing through the night. Each note slid along Margaret's spine like a blade of ice, making her shiver, yet binding her inescapably. The song coiled around her mind, sweet in its hypnosis, dissolving the fragile line between reason and delirium. Below, the waves began to shift. Their rhythm aligned with the voice, as though the entire ocean had become its orchestra. Each surge, each shattering crash against the cliffs, deepened the lament, layering it with the resonance of 1,000 drowned throats. Margaret clutched her chest, her breath unsteady. She knew she was hearing something that did not belong to this world, yet her soul yearned for it. The song no longer surrounded her. It seemed to resound from within her ribcage, pulling her into its harmony. The fog, thickening around the outcrop, began to swirl, spinning in slow, spectral circles beneath the lantern's glow. In the mist, Margaret glimpsed drifting shapes, arms reaching upward, hair streaming and sodden, eyes wide and frantic in silent pleas. They dissolved into the melody, vanishing into the sorrowful chorus of the unseen. The lantern's flame pulsed with the music, flashing brighter with each rise of the voice. Every flicker felt like a signal, a heartbeat of the sea itself, seducing her soul. Margaret's feet moved toward the cliff's edge, step by step, though her mind screamed in resistance. The rock beneath her boots was slick, cold, treacherous, but she could not stop. When the song reached its crescendo, the heavens tore open in a slash of lightning. For an instant, the storm illuminated her. A woman's figure, slim, draped in white, her dark hair whipped into a tangle by the sea wind. She stood still amid the fog, facing Margaret. Her face was veiled in shadow, but her presence radiated an eternal grief. Margaret trembled, her eyes wide with horror. She knew she was beholding the living witness, or rather, the lingering soul, of the legend. The woman needed no gesture, no beckoning hand. The song was her summons, binding Margaret's heart, her feet, pulling her inch by inch toward the brink. A colossal wave rose, shattering into spray that mingled with the dirge. In that moment, Margaret felt herself poised on the threshold, between land and sea, life and death, flesh and phantom. The lantern still burned, unwavering, the single eye of the widow fixed upon her every step. The song was no longer music. It had become command, an invisible tether coiling around Margaret's soul, dragging her away from the world she once knew. Ye. The lantern trembled softly in the night, its glow no longer a simple flame, but a vein of molten blood coursing through the dark. The sea groaned below the cliff, each crashing wave a funeral drumbeat, carrying the dirge that filled the air. Margaret stood trembling, her eyes wide as the figure in the white dress emerged in sharp relief within the whirling fog. She stood upright, motionless, on the precipice where no human could stand. The long white dress, torn and stained with dark streaks, as if soaked in salt and blood from ages past, whipped violently in the wind. Black hair clung in tangled strands, yet could not veil the face that revealed itself. Pale as bone, its skin tinted with a deathly green, eyes hollow, yet glimmering as though reflecting the entire sea at night. Margaret's body locked in place, every muscle seized in terror. The song no longer rose from the ocean depths, but from the woman's own chest. Each note pulsed into the air, cracking the black sky to reveal ghastly streaks of pallid green light, like drowned corpses adrift beneath water. Shapes in the fog, arms, hair, faceless visages, floated toward her, winding around her like a living funeral shroud. Beside her, the lantern blazed brighter than ever. Its light clamped down on Margaret's gaze, forcing her to witness the spectacle. The woman tilted her head, lips parting, and from them unspooled a thin ribbon of black smoke. It curled into the wind, spilling downward across the cliffside, cloaking the very path Margaret had taken. Every escape was sealed. Only one way remained, forward toward the abyss. Fog swirled tighter around her, the salt-heavy stench choking her lungs. She staggered, desperate to turn back. But her feet were soldered to the cold stone. Each attempt to lift them was shredded by the rising song. cutting her will apart like fabric torn by a blade. The rhythm of the waves below fused perfectly with the hammer of her heart, until Margaret no longer felt she belonged to herself. The woman in white slowly raised her hand. The motion was delicate, almost tender, like an invitation, but it carried the weight of a command no mortal could resist. At once the lantern flared, flooding the cliff with a blinding gold as if a dead sun had erupted before her. In its glare, Margaret glimpsed another vision. Dozens, no, hundreds, of figures sinking into the water, their hands reaching in vain toward the shore, their eyes hollow, pleading, unredeemed. Shaken to her core, she could not look away. The lantern and the woman fused into a single hypnotic point, swallowing everything else. Wind shrieked, waves burst in white fury, but all was nothing more than accompaniment to the mournful hymn that would not end. In that moment, Margaret understood. She had been called, not by voice, but by soul. The woman needed no step forward, no touch of hand. The song and the light had done all. She simply stood there, a lighthouse of darkness, guiding the doomed into the sea. And Margaret, though she knew she was standing at a threshold from which no return was possible, could not resist. Neolao. Margaret stood at the cliff's edge, her breath ragged, mingling with the freezing mist. Below, the ocean yawned open like a colossal mouth, eager to devour any soul who strayed too near. Waves pounded in relentless fury, spraying white foam that rose like hundreds of grasping hands from the abyss. The woman in the white dress remained still, her hollow eyes blazing, locking onto Margaret's soul. The song endured, no longer music but a chain, an invisible binding that shackled her body. The lantern flared violently, its beam burning through her, scorching away the final flicker of resistance. Margaret felt her feet take one step, then another. The path back was gone. Each frozen breath coiled in her lungs, each slowing heartbeat fused with the rhythm of the sea. She knew that with another step, there would be no return. But her body no longer obeyed reason. She was nothing more than driftwood, carried on a current she could not fight. A violent gust swept over the cliff, carrying with it the stench of rotting seaweed. The heavens quaked with thunder, and in the lightning's flash Margaret saw faces, strangers she had never known, their eyes all the same, empty, despairing, sinking slowly into the black sea. Their shapes drifted toward the woman in white, dissolving into the darkness that surrounded her, leaving only a muffled echo like cries silenced beneath water. The lantern shook violently, its flame surging upward into a pillar of fire against the storm. Its blaze was no warning, it was triumph, the sick exaltation of a ritual centuries old. Margaret stretched out her arms, entranced, and hurled herself into the light. In the moment her body tipped forward into the abyss, all sound ceased. Only the last echo of her heartbeat remained, absorbed into the unholy hymn. She plunged, the ocean slicing her skin like shards of glass. And before the darkness swallowed her whole, Margaret looked upward and saw the lantern, shrinking, vanishing into the storm above. The next morning the sea lay still, as though nothing had happened. An old fisherman, steering his boat toward open water, glanced up at the cliff. He froze. The lantern burned brighter than ever before, still alight even beneath the rising sun. Its glow seemed stronger now, fierce and unyielding, as though it had been fed a new soul. In the fishing village, a young girl who had once heard the legend saw it too. the flickering flame in the fog, whispering names of the lost. Any who lingered too long felt a faint, mournful song in the wind, soft yet unforgettable. No one ever found where Margaret had gone. Her weathered leather journal was never recovered. Only the lantern remained, burning brighter than ever, a testament that one more soul had joined the choir beneath the sea. And from that night onward, whoever gazed into its glow could never be certain they would return. The lantern, the immortal heart of the widow, would never go out. Niwa Awa. In Port St. Lucie, Florida, there stands a tree the locals call the Devil's Tree. In the 1970s, a cold-blooded killer hung his victims from its twisted branches. Though he died in prison, people believe his spirit and the restless souls of those he murdered remain bound to its roots. At night, the rotted ropes still sway in the wind, creaking with a sound like ragged breath, the last gasps of the hanged. Those who dare to draw near rarely leave whole. Whoa! Florida, though. The summer air was heavy, thick with the swamp's breath, damp earth, rotting leaves, and the faint sting of stagnant water. An old pickup truck rattled to a stop on a dirt road, its headlights slicing the darkness before dying into silence. 4 young travelers climbed out, standing before the wall of forest that marked the edge of Port St. Lucie's wilderness. Ryan was the first to step down, eyes burning with excitement. He had read an old newspaper article about the Devil's Tree, a cursed oak where unspeakable murders had once taken place. For him, this wasn't a warning. It was the perfect urban legend challenge. Lena, his girlfriend, was less enthusiastic. Arms crossed, she stared at the dense tree line with suspicion. "This is insane," she muttered under her breath, though she followed anyway. She wasn't superstitious, not really, but the thought of standing where real people had died twisted her stomach into knots. Chris, tall and broad-shouldered, carried his ever-present video camera. He grinned as he filmed the group, already imagining how the footage would play out. "Found footage gold," he joked, panning across Lena and Maya. But Maya didn't smile. Quiet, withdrawn, she had felt uneasy the moment they pulled off the road. The heaviness in her chest grew stronger with every step. The 4 trekked deeper along the dirt path. The chorus of insects grew sparse, replaced by an unnatural silence. Nearly an hour passed before they stumbled into a small clearing, and there it was. The Devil's Tree. It towered above them, a grotesque sentinel of wood and shadow. Its bark was gnarled and cracked, the limbs bent at odd angles like broken arms. Hollow knots stared back like twisted faces. From the largest branch hung a single rope, frayed and rotting, swaying gently in the warm breeze. The creak it made was sharp, dry, like a strained breath caught in a dying throat. Maya shivered, convinced that unseen eyes were watching from the darkness. Chris raised his camera, tilting slowly upward to capture the full scale of the tree. "Perfect," he whispered. Ryan stepped closer, pressing his palm to the rough bark. Despite the heat around him, the wood was unnaturally cold. For an instant, he swore he felt a faint, steady pulse beneath his hand, like a heartbeat buried in the trunk. He yanked his hand back, masking his unease with a grin. "Here," he said firmly. "We camp here, right under the Devil's Tree." Lena stared once more at the dangling rope, unease clawing at her. But When Ryan struck a match to start a fire, and Chris circled eagerly with his camera, she reluctantly joined in. Maya remained seated on the ground, her gaze fixed on the swaying rope, as though she expected something heavy to drop from it at any moment. The night crept in, shadows stretching long and endless. And as darkness swallowed the clearing, the devil's tree cast its shadow over them all. No, indeed. The fire crackled and spat, casting trembling light across the clearing. The four sat in a rough circle, beer cans in hand, doing their best to laugh, to pretend at ease. But the massive trunk loomed above, its shadow stretching long and heavy, swallowing the fire's glow as if it wanted to smother the night itself. Chris rarely lowered his camera. He moved slowly, capturing every detail. The frayed rope swaying in the breeze, the warped knots in the bark that resembled twisted faces, the firelight flickering against the tree like shadows writhing across its skin. He smiled, satisfied. This was the perfect set for a horror film. Ryan, with the eager tone of a storyteller, recounted what he had read. How a serial killer once bound his victims, tortured them, then hung their bodies from the very branch above them. The man had died in prison, but visitors swore they'd heard the rasp of tightening rope, seen the silhouette of bodies dangling in the dark. His voice dropped lower, savoring the tension. But as he finished, the forest wind rose suddenly, scattering embers through the air. Lena shivered, her gaze fixed on the rope as it swayed harder. "That's enough, Ryan," she snapped quietly, though gooseflesh prickled her arms. Maya hadn't looked away once. Her voice was barely more than a breath. Is there someone hanging there?" All eyes turned upward. Nothing, just the rope, twisting idly. Chris chuckled, but when he glanced at the viewfinder, his grin faltered. On the tiny screen, a faint silhouette dangled from the branch, its shape swaying in rhythm with the rope. He blinked, tilted the camera again, and it was gone. He said nothing. The night thickened. Around them, the forest was unnervingly still. No crickets, no frogs, only the sigh of wind sliding through the branches. The air grew dense, each breath sticking in their throats. Near midnight, Maya bolted upright, pale and trembling. She stammered that she'd heard whispering right against her ear while her eyes were closed. It said my name," she whispered. Ryan brushed it off, insisting it was her imagination. But then, a sharp crack at the base of the tree. All four heard it, clear, distinct, like a rope tightening. Chris swung the camera around, its small light piercing the dark. The rope was swaying violently now, emitting a dry, grating screech, as if some unseen weight was dragging it taut. The fire roared suddenly, then sputtered to embers, leaving only a faint, unsteady glow. The shadow of the tree lengthened, stretching over the camp like a predator's hand. Lena clutched Ryan's arm, whispering that they needed to leave. But the path they had taken was gone, swallowed into an endless wall of black. A chill swept through the clearing, though the air was perfectly still. The rope jerked wildly, then stopped all at once, hanging slack, as if something had just dropped from it. Maya burst into sobs. Chris filmed frantically, but through his lens, he saw only twisted branches, curling and stretching like skeletal arms, waiting to receive them. Ryan forced himself to stand, voice trembling. "It's fine," he said, though his bravado had cracked. He lifted his flashlight and trained it on the rope. Empty. Nothing there. And yet, they all knew. They were no longer alone beneath the devil's tree. Norden, shy. The night pressed in heavy and absolute, the fire reduced to dying embers, the only real light, the trembling beam of Ryan's flashlight. The four of them huddled close, breaths short and ragged, as though the darkness would swallow them whole if they strayed apart. Chris held his camera tight, eyes glued to the screen. To the naked eye, the rope was empty, but through the lens, something else appeared. A pale, blurred figure hanging limp, head slumped to the side, hair shrouding its face. He shuddered but couldn't look away. When he panned to another branch, another body swung there. Then another, and another. 2, 3, 4. Until the clearing seemed choked with swaying, spectral shapes. His throat was dry as he whispered, trembling, "Guys, look at this!" Ryan snatched the camera, pressing his face close to the viewfinder. The excitement drained from him, replaced by a stark pallor. It's just a glitch," he insisted. But when he lifted his flashlight and swept the beam across the tree, Lena screamed. For an instant, they all saw it. No camera tricks, no shadows. A body dangled from the branch before them, swaying in the breeze. The skin was ashen, the head hung low, the weight shifting with each creak of the rope. And then, as if dispersed by the air itself, it vanished, leaving the rope to swing hollow once more. Silence. Only Maya's choked sobs broke it. Ryan tried to steady his voice, though it trembled. Hallucinations were just stressed. But even as he spoke, a sharp crack split the stillness, like a branch snapping under a heavy load. Lena spun around and froze. Just a few steps behind her, another hanged figure. Its eyes were open, rolled white, fixed directly on her. Her scream tore through the clearing as she yanked Ryan to the ground. The fire spat and flared, shadows whipping wildly. Chris swung the camera in every direction, capturing what none of them could deny now. Dozens of figures suspended above, crowding the branches. Some only faint outlines, others so vivid he could see the deep purple bruises wrapped around their necks. Maya clutched her ears, shrieking, "They're whispering! They're calling me! They want me to follow!" Lena sized her shoulders, fighting to hold her back, but Maya writhed, as though invisible hands were dragging her toward the trunk. Ryan raised his light, shouting into the void, "We're not afraid. We only came to see." But his voice was drowned in the sudden chorus of sound, the simultaneous screech of ropes straining, taut and merciless. Above, the phantom bodies swayed together in rhythm, a silent choir twisting in a wind that wasn't there. A pale glow shimmered faintly, as though the clearing itself had become a macabre stage. Chris let the camera drop, clutching his head, mumbling, "They're not going away. They're here. They want us to take their place." The fire died with a hiss, plunging everything into suffocating black. Only Ryan's flashlight flickered, its beam jittering across fractured glimpses of horror. And in that trembling glow, all three saw the same vision. Themselves, each one of them, hanging from the branches. Bloated faces, bulging eyes, rope-burned necks. The flashlight clattered to the ground, rolling, casting fractured light up the trunk of the devil's tree. Maya went still, her eyes emptied, her lips moved with a voice that wasn't hers. "You cannot leave. The tree has chosen." No one had time to react. A sudden gust of icy air swept the clearing, and the rope groaned loud and sharp, ready, waiting for a neck to claim. Nyobima. The wind howled through the clearing like a chorus of the damned. Shadows danced wildly across the devil's tree, broken fragments of light from Ryan's fallen flashlight stuttering across the dirt and flaring briefly against the swaying figures above. Maya stood rigid, eyes rolled white, lips moving ceaselessly. It's calling me, telling me to climb higher. It says I'll be free. Her voice was no longer her own. It was layered, distorted, as though countless other voices were speaking through her, groaning from deep within the earth. Lena clutched her tightly, sobbing. Don't listen, Maya. It's not real, it's not. But Maya's body was cold and stiff, as lifeless as a corpse on its feet. Ryan lunged forward, grabbing Maya's arm to pull her away from the trunk. The moment he touched her, a crushing force clamped onto his hand. Agony seared down to his bones. He tore himself free with a scream, collapsing, his palm seared red with rope-like burns, as though the bark itself had branded him. The tree, Chris stammered, his camera trembling in his grip. It's alive. It wants blood. It won't let us leave. He swung the lens upward and saw that the hanging shapes were no longer spectral illusions. They moved, their heads tilted in unison, gazes falling on the living below. White, lidless eyes gaped wide, mouths hung opened. And for a heartbeat, Chris swore he heard it, the collective crack of necks snapping, echoing through the clearing. Then it struck. From above, a rope uncoiled, slithering down with the speed of a striking snake. In an instant, the noose cinched tight around Maya's throat and yanked her skyward. Her scream split the night. She kicked and clawed, her legs thrashing as the rope bit deeper, skin darkening to a brutal violet. Lena and Ryan seized her legs, dragging downward with all their strength, but the invisible force from the tree pulled harder, inexorable. Inch by inch, Maya rose into the air. Cut it! Cut the rope! Ryan roared. Chris fumbled in his pack, yanked out a small knife, and slashed at the noose. Sparks flew as the blade bounced off. The rope wasn't fiber at all, but something impossibly hard, like frozen steel. Chris staggered back, hands trembling. Maya shrieked, then fell silent. Her body twitched violently before sagging, limp. Her eyes bulged, her chest heaving ragged gasps that faltered and broke. The only sound was the dry rasp of the rope grinding against bark. No! Lena screamed, clawing at the tree itself, her fingers splitting, blood streaking the bark. But the branches writhed like grotesque limbs, curling out and striking her down into the dirt. Ryan's voice cracked into madness. He threw his arms wide, shouting at the looming trunk. What do you want? Take me instead. Let her go. And the forest answered. A laughter erupted, harsh, guttural, spilling from every direction at once. It was everywhere, echoing in the trees, grinding through the soil, shaking in their bones. The hanged shadows thrashed wildly, swaying like a grotesque choir applauding his desperate plea. Chris filmed, his voice breaking into a whisper. It never lets go. Anyone who comes here belongs to it. Maya dangled high above, her neck grotesquely twisted, and then, slowly, her lifeless eyes rolled forward, bleaching to a blank, vacant stare. The same hollow gaze as the others. Another body had joined the Devil's Tree's eternal chorus of the damned. Penny, now. Maya dangled in the air, her body limp, her face bruised and purple, her eyes hollowed into something that no longer belonged to the living. Lena screamed her name again and again, but her cries were swallowed by the skeletal trees, fading into nothingness. Ryan yanked Lena to her feet, the burn marks of the rope still glowing red across his palm. His voice cracked, raw with desperation. "We have to leave, now, before it takes us too." Chris clutched the camera tight, trembling. "You don't get it. There is no way out. It won't let us go." As if to confirm his words, the forest shifted before their eyes. The path they had taken to enter this place was gone, swallowed whole. In its place loomed walls of trees, their twisted branches knitting together like blackened fingers to bar their escape. Every direction they turned, the beam of the flashlight cut only into suffocating dark heavy with swaying silhouettes, bodies swinging just beyond reach. Lena's teeth chattered. "It's like we're trapped inside it." Ryan's grip tightened around the knife, his eyes feral. "Then we kill it. We cut the damn tree down." He lunged at the gnarled trunk, hacking again and again. Each strike rang out not like wood, but like shrieks, agonized, piercing, human. Thick sap bled from the wounds, dark and syrupy, reeking of iron and rot. The stench gagged Lena. She doubled over, retching. Chris instinctively raised the camera. Through the lens, Ryan's form blurred, his face flickering into that of a hanging corpse, eyes bulging, mouth gaping in eternal scream. "Ryan, stop!" Chris cried out. "It's turning you into one of them." The knife slipped from Ryan's grip. He staggered back, clawing at his throat. Rope marks carved deep across his neck, tightening as if dragged by an invisible noose. His breath hitched, a wet rattle. He reached toward Lena with trembling fingers. "Run, Lena, run." She seized his hand, sobbing, trying to wrench him free from the tree's hold. But in a heartbeat, the darkness surged, devouring him whole. When the flashlight swung back, Ryan was gone. Only a rope dangled gently from a branch, swaying in silence. Lena collapsed, choking on grief. Chris hauled her up, his own voice shredded. "We have to keep moving. We have to try." They stumbled blindly through the shifting woods, but the deeper they ran, the more the forest filled with them. Bodies, hanging from every branch, dozens, hundreds. Vacant eyes followed their steps, mouths slack in silent mockery. Among the faces, Lena saw Maya, Ryan, and countless others she didn't know, victims of generations past, bound eternally to the tree's curse. Their family had grown. The flashlight sputtered, its glow dimming battery drained to the final breath. Chris whispered to the dark, as if confessing to himself. "As long as the camera records, someone will know. Someone has to know." But Lena already understood. No one would believe. No one would ever find them. The wind rose in a hollow roar, twisting into laughter, into a dirge. Overhead, the moon vanished behind the branches, smothered. The forest drowned in black. The tree had chosen. Arnin. At a dust-choked flea market, Nathan, A college student obsessed with vintage relics uncovered a worn VHS tape labeled Home 1995. When he pressed play, his breath caught. The footage revealed the very house where he'd spent his childhood. At first, the scene seemed tender, familiar. Family birthdays, laughter, warm lights spilling across the kitchen table. But as the tape played on, faces began to blur into hollow shadows, and Nathan himself appeared in moments he had no memory of ever living. Nathan had an unusual obsession, collecting obsolete electronics. While his friends spent money on the newest consoles or sleek sound systems, he sought out dust-caked relics, especially VHS players. He often joked that he had been born in the wrong decade, meant for the 1990s, rather than the age of the internet. One gray Saturday morning, Nathan wandered through a flea market on the outskirts of town. The sky hung heavy, the wind snapping tops against rusted poles, carrying with it the sour tang of metal and mildew. He drifted past a stall, cluttered with old pop CDs, cassette tapes, and stacks of unlabeled VHS cassettes, their plastic cases dulled and scratched. Among the chaos, one tape caught his eye. A black cassette with a yellowed sticker scrawled in marker, Home 1995. The vendor, a weary-looking man with hollow eyes, gave a dry chuckle when Nathan picked it up. That one used to belong to a strange family. If you want it, take it. Came in with a whole lot. No one dares play it anymore. Nathan frowned, but curiosity eclipsed doubt. He handed over a few dollars, slid the tape into his backpack, and made his way back to his dorm room. Inside, the battered VHS player sat waiting. As he wiped the dust from the case, he felt as if he were opening a door into the past. The television flickered, static hissing and growling until the picture steadied. A birthday party appeared on screen. A child leaned forward to blow out candles on a frosted cake, balloons bobbing in the background. Laughter echoed, warped but distinct. Nathan tilted his head. The kitchen in the video looked uncannily familiar. The wooden table, the pale yellow curtains, the red patterned tablecloth. They matched perfectly the house of his childhood in Michigan. His chest tightened. He tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but as the images sharpened, so did the memories. The old wall, clock, the vase his mother kept on the corner table. "No way," he whispered, eyes fixed to the glow. The tape jumped to a new scene, Thanksgiving dinner. A golden brown turkey glistened under the warm glow of a ceiling lamp. The family at the table smiled, laughing in casual ease. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary, until Nathan noticed a detail that froze his blood. In the corner of the frame sat a boy, silent, unmoving, his wide eyes staring directly into the camera. That boy was him. Nathan lurched forward, heart hammering. His memory was empty of this moment. He had never sat at a Thanksgiving table like the one playing before him.
But the turkey was looking
back. The face, the haircut, the striped sweater, there was no mistaking it. The screen rippled with static, then steadied again. Nathan's trembling hand stopped the tape. The room was deathly still, broken only by the low mechanical hum of the VHS player. He leaned back, dragging air into his lungs, telling himself it was all a bizarre coincidence. But deep down, he knew this was no ordinary home video. The tape wasn't just recording some forgotten family. It was reaching into him, into memories he was certain he had never lived. Yo. Nathan couldn't tear himself away from the tape. After the first night, He wrapped it up, shoved it deep into a drawer, and tried to forget. But by midnight, he lay restless, thoughts circling endlessly around the boy's face, his own face, caught forever on that grainy footage. Before dawn, unable to bear the pressure any longer, he snapped upright, slid the cassette into the machine, and pressed play. The black screen flickered, and a new scene bled through. The same house. But the light had changed, thicker, oppressive, as if shadows had swallowed the walls. The camera drifted across the dining table, where the family gathered. Nathan's breath hitched. His parents were there, unmistakably, but their faces blurred into smudged darkness, smiles warped into grotesque curves, their eyes nothing but deep, black hollows. A chill spread through his chest. In the frame, the boy, his younger double, still sat perfectly still, rigid and silent. The camera crept closer, inexorably zooming in. The boy's eyes locked forward, staring not at the lens, but through it. Nathan felt the shift instantly. He was no longer watching. He was being watched. His hand shot out, slamming the pause button. The image froze, the faceless family stiff as wax dolls. Yet sound still leaked from the speakers, thin, rasping whispers, looping again and again. Not laughter, not background noise. Words, barely audible, but there. Come back, stay home. Sweat stung Nathan's forehead. He jammed the stop button. The screen fell into blackness. Silence closed in, broken only by the low mechanical hum of the VHS spinning down. He sat frozen, heart battering his ribs as if it wanted out. Those blurred faces, those hollow eyes, those voices calling him back. None of it felt like the record of strangers. It was his, bound to him, as though the tape had reached into his past and twisted it into something unrecognizable. With shaking hands, Nathan flooded the room with light, yanked the tape from the player, and locked it in his desk drawer. Out of sight, out of reach. But even in darkness, with wood and metal between him and the cassette, he could feel it waiting. Patient, demanding. And it would not stop until he pressed play again. That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. He lay rigid in bed, trying to banish the memory of those faces swallowed by shadow. But the harder he pushed them away, the tighter they clung. When exhaustion finally dragged him under, he slipped into a dream unlike any other. He was standing in the kitchen of his childhood home. A jaundiced light spilled from above, carrying the faint scent of turkey and sugared cake. Around the dining table, figures sat perfectly still, their backs turned to him. Silent, motionless, like statues. Nathan crept closer and placed a trembling hand on one shoulder. Slowly, the figure turned. There was no face, only a smooth, featureless void of black. He woke with a violent gasp, his back slick with cold sweat. But the sight that greeted him froze his heart. The dull glow of a television screen flickered across his dorm room walls. He was certain, absolutely certain, he hadn't turned it on. On the static screen, white noise danced and hissed. It can't play by itself, Nathan whispered. He sat up slowly. The picture sharpened. Not the childhood house this time, but his dorm room, his desk, his chair, even the tiny scratch on the wall, captured with perfect accuracy. His blood turned to ice. In the center of the frame stood an empty chair, positioned directly before the television, the very chair Nathan had been sitting in earlier. The image shook slightly, as if a hand held the camera and filmed in real time. Nathan lunged for the lamp switch, flooding the room with light. But he was alone. Heart racing, he yanked the power cord from the wall. The television should have died. It didn't. The screen glowed on, unwavering. The room within the image remained identical. And then, in the frame, a figure appeared. It slumped into the empty chair. A blurred silhouette, head bowed, shoulders trembling with the rhythm of a muffled laugh. Nathan staggered back, colliding with the wall. He blinked just once, and the picture collapsed into darkness. Static filled the screen again. He didn't dare move closer. For the first time in his life, Nathan understood that the border between memory, dream, and waking reality no longer existed. The tape was no longer showing his world. It was rewriting it. Yes. Nathan couldn't say when he'd finally fallen asleep. When he opened his eyes, the clock read nearly 3 in the morning. The room was a heavy, suffocating dark. Then a sound cut through it. Click, click. Steady, mechanical, like a tape being rewound inside the player. His heart pounded. He turned slowly. The VHS machine, unplugged, powerless, was running itself. The red power light blinked. The cassette spun, scraping with a dry, grinding hiss. Instinct shoved him forward. He lunged to yank the tape free. The moment his fingers brushed the plastic, the TV flared to life. No static now. The screen showed his room, clear, still, unnervingly precise, as if an invisible camera were filming every corner in real time. From the edge of the frame, a gray, ink-smeared hand reached for the empty chair. Long, crooked fingers trembled, leaving black smears like spilled ink across the fabric. Nathan froze. Sweat rolled down his temple. He looked toward the real chair in the room, empty. On the screen, the black shape lowered itself into the seat. A gaunt figure slumped forward, dressed in threadbare clothing from another age, hair matted over half its face. Its head turned, slowly, with a deliberate, bone-slow motion, fixing its gaze straight into the camera. And Nathan understood. It was looking at him. A new sound began, a slow tap, 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 as if someone were rapping a knuckle against the inside of the glass. The taps multiplied, quickening into a frantic staccato. Each knock made the screen tremble and warp, the glass seeming to strain as if about to shatter. Nathan backed away, legs trembling. The knocking grew louder, layered with a chorus of whispers, drawn out and pleading. Come back, come back. No longer buried in noise, but a single, unmistakable command. He screamed, lunged for the outlet, yanking cords free, tearing cables from sockets. The room should have gone dark. It didn't. The television burned on. The silhouette remained, seated, smiling with a mouth split open in a grin. From the screen, black blood began to seep, thick and glossy, trailing down the glass and pooling onto the floor of his room. Nathan collapsed backward, the world tilting. He felt trapped inside a door being forced open from both sides, one leading to everything he knew, the other to the warped memories the tape fed. That door was opening wider, and it was hungry for him. Nathan no longer knew where he stood. The dorm room warped and bled away, its walls sagging like melted wax before reassembling into crumbling brick, the walls of his childhood home. But it wasn't warm as memory had promised. It was ruined, dim, and suffocating with the stench of mold. In front of him sat the old television, its screen blazing white. The shadow was still there, but now it had taken a shape. The face was a grotesque reflection of Nathan himself. Eye sockets, hollow and endless. The mouth split wide, dragging back toward the ears in an impossible grin. "Nathan," the voice hissed from the speakers, buried in static. "You belong here." He tried to scream, to run, but his legs were nailed into the rotting floorboards. Each breath tore through his chest like shards of glass, cutting him from within. The screen flickered. Now it showed him another Nathan, sitting lifeless in the dorm room, eyes vacant, dried blood cracking at the corners of his mouth. That figure turned its head with deliberate slowness, staring directly into the lens, straight through the screen, straight into the trembling Nathan outside. And he understood. The exchange was complete. What remained in the world was an empty husk, while his true self was trapped forever inside the VHS tape. Then came the knocking. Thud, thud, thud. But this time, it wasn't from the television. It came from behind. He spun around. Every door in the ruined house creaked open. Beyond them sat the faceless figures from his dreams, motionless around the dining table. Together, they turned their hollow voids toward him. In that final collapsing moment, their mouths opened, and from their throats poured his own voice, cold, inescapable. "Welcome home." The television snapped to black, and the thick, dark swallowed everything. "Maybe it's our fault,"